Good evening, everyone. It's Thursday, November 10th, 7:30. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Finance to order. First item on the agenda is public comment. I think all of our guests here are here regarding our topics. Jen, have we gotten any online?
We have not.
Okay, and any emails?
No.
Okay, so we'll move on. So we have 4 items on our agenda tonight. It's a special meeting, so we're going to have to limit all of our business and discussion to items around these 4 items. I think the way the agenda is set up is the first one is just to receive a sort of update on all of HHR as well as the sort of incremental appropriations we're looking for in bonding for each of the 3 different schools. And then after you give sort of one combined update, with David's help as well, then we'll move on to actually voting and authorizing each of the three items. So on that, I guess Chris or Jill, whoever would like to take the lead. And I think maybe just to poll the members here, Chris and team gave a fairly comprehensive update to the Board of Selectmen, right, among others. But on Monday, did most people get to watch that? Okay, so I think most of us saw that. I think it's always good to kind of go over it, but just in terms of
we can go over it. We can go over some of the things fairly quickly, but that's actually very, very helpful so that we, can save some time with folks if folks did see the Board of Selectmen presentation. First and foremost, thank you very, very much to this board for making the time to hold this special meeting. As you know, we're in a bit of a time crunch. We're really working to a state-dictated schedule. We have to have our submissions into the state by the 1st of December to be on the legislative calendar, meaning we have to be approved and have the resolutions for the additional appropriation voted on by the RTM, and then have a 10-day period of contest or challenge on the RTM resolutions and have that pass before we can submit to the state. The resolutions have to be the final unchallengeable, unappealable resolutions. So in order to do that, we have to be at the next RTM meeting, which is this coming Monday night. And that, as folks know, is going to also be the reconstituted RTM post-election. So we really appreciate your guys making the effort to put this special meeting together so we can stay on that schedule.
Okay, and to me, just to remind our board, I think one of the things that was contemplated is the RTM going first and sort of creating a sort of provisional appropriation, and then we would have done it afterwards at our meeting on Tuesday. The concern was, given the tight time frame, is if something different was to happen at our board versus what was sent to the RTM, that could force them all to get back together again. And so since we are 7 people, it was easier to pull us together quicker than 100 people.
Yeah, and similarly, we were appreciative of what some of the committees, the RTM committees, Finance and Budget and Education, did by moving schedules around so that they could review these things and approve them as well. So we have kind of a unified presentation. Jim, we can talk about the project review, where we stand, and then we'll really just naturally roll into why we're asking for the additional appropriations. Since the last time we were in front of this committee, the project has really, really advanced, thanks in a huge part to a really, really good on-it design team. We were in front of the Board of Finance in the spring, getting approval for our initial appropriation that had to be put in at the end of June to the state. Since then, our design team has completed schematic designs, which have been presented to and approved by the HHR committee, and more recently have completed the schematic designs, both for the architectural and design parts of the school, as well as the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing aspects of the design. We've now submitted those schematic designs to Planning and Zoning. There's a series of Planning and Zoning hearings, and we've worked very closely with Planning and Zoning. They've kind of been at the table as the design process has proceeded. The schematic designs have been submitted to Planning and Zoning. The first Planning and Zoning public hearing is next Tuesday, and then a separate one on the 29th. So I think we're doing Hindley and Royal on the 15th and Holmes on the 29th. We've been in front of the Architectural Review Board. We got feedback from ARB. They were generally very supportive of the design. They did give us some feedback, and so the design team is taking that into account. And now they have moved on to the design development phase. There's really only one or two components of the design that they still need guidance on. One of which involving the 32 Homes property, which we'll talk about a little bit more this evening. So the project is really moving along. We're on schedule at this point. Everything's sort of happening as needed. So project goals, if you recall from the last time we were in front of you from the presentations in the spring, the primary project goals as laid out in the Board of Education ed specs were elimination of the temporary portable classrooms, renovating or building new learning commons, general learning commons, and dealing with the existing libraries, which are in many cases obsolete, correctly sizing the general and the special classrooms, and then, as we mentioned, the MEP upgrading the outdated systems. And that, as we noted, was a significant part of the project. We, round numbers, it's about 30% of the budget is, things that we note as you can't see. It's air conditioning, electrical, LED lighting, things of that nature. In the spring, when we were, and as identified in the ed specs, and as we were going through the preliminary process in the spring, there were a couple of items that were identified for study that were not definitive at the time. So that was possibly utilizing what people have been calling the Curtis property, but we're now calling 32 Hoyt, which is its street address, looking into the parking needs at the schools, working with the school district on the parking needs, looking also at traffic flow at Hindley, and that mostly was centered around the idea of putting in a curb cut on the post road so that people could exit Hindley onto the post road. There were also some items that were required by code, mostly related to drainage because of the amount of new construction. There was going to be new impervious surface, primarily the roofs, and additional paving. And so we were going to have to work with P&Z and with the environmental department. And so the drainage at both Hindley and Royal were contemplated originally. Drainage at Holmes has been studied as part of the 32 Hoyt component of it. And again, if you recall with Hindley, we got some feedback from neighbors to the south of the school because of flooding. And so the civil engineer team on the design team has spent a bunch of time trying to figure that out as well. And then the other item that we talked about in the spring, but frankly was kind of deferred, was possibly integrating the roof work, the roof project that was contemplated at the time into this project, but we passed on that at the time. So tonight we're going to focus on, and I'll move fairly quickly through this, we're going to focus on the 32 Hoyt property and the roof project. We'll start with 32 Hoyt. 32 Hoyt, we studied it. It seemed like an opportunity to expand the Holmes campus. We had a property survey done, we had a wetlands survey done, environmental study done. The site does not include wetlands. And in late October, the Board of Selectmen voted to give the Board of Education care, custody, and control of 32 Hoyt. And care, custody, and control, as you know, is the basis on which the Board of Education operates the schools that are otherwise on town property. Part of the 32 Hoyt property is going to include some of the new construction at Holmes. We're also it also contemplates building a new service and emergency access road. We're going to add 15 parking spaces in the existing footprint of the campus, not on 32 Hoyt, and we're going to deal with stormwater management on 32 Hoyt. You guys may have noticed over the course of the past few weeks, we'd been getting quite a bit of input from the neighbors around the Holmes school, primarily folks on Lake Drive and some on Phillips Lane. Our design team took all of that feedback into account, tried to be as responsive as we could to that. Originally, the plan included building a new parking area on 32 Hoyt, which has been eliminated. We moved the access road, eliminating a retaining wall and more and lessening the amount of site disturbance, and trying to come up with a couple of different alternatives for stormwater management, because one of the big issues that the folks on Phillips and Lake raised was flooding. And so a big part of the design around 32 Hoyt is stormwater management, and also trying to minimize the site disturbance, try to minimize the amount of trees we take down and things of that nature. The one thing, as I noted, the only piece of the 32 Hoyt design that our committee still needs to give the design team final guidance on is which of the stormwater management systems is most optimal, all things considered, whether we do, the choices are visible and invisible, if you will, an open detention pond versus a covered tank are really the two, in the most basic terms, of the two options that you have for stormwater management.
Chris, in terms of your comment on the parking spaces, did you say you removed the parking spaces
We
from
didn't-
32 or just decreased them?
Well, what we did is we were able to expand the existing parking lot at the north side of the existing parking lot to accommodate 10 more spaces, I
So
believe.
the hope was to be a total of 95. We're going to end up with 92. So we've lost 3
Right.
spaces, but we felt like in order to accommodate the design, that was an acceptable trade-off.
That on balance, the amount of frankly unhappy feedback we were getting from the neighbors by putting in what was going to be a new parking lot that you were going to have to drive down a little hill onto. So you're going to have main parking lot, new parking lot. There were concerns about that new parking lot, and we were able to find almost enough spaces by reconfiguring and expanding a little bit of the existing parking lot.
Also meant we don't have to put a retaining wall in, which is, a significant savings to the project. So it felt like, and there would not need to be lighting on the site, which a parking lot would have required.
Okay, so no parking back there, just the
No
only thing would be is
parking.
water retention?
Correct. No new
Well-
parking on 32 Hoyt. Correct.
So the music suite addition definitely is going a little bit into the property. We are certainly going to have a service and emergency access road. The stormwater, we are still considering exactly where it will be located because there are multiple possibilities. The original design was for a pond in the middle of Curtis because of the way in the middle of 32 Hoyt because of the way it dips down. It's a natural. But we have been having conversations from an aesthetics, safety, and overall efficacy and financial perspective about where to put it. If we use the underground, the basin, or a tank?
The tank.
That possibly could be located under some of the new asphalt that's going to be disturbed anyway. So that may not be all the way on Hoyt. So, we are presenting this as these were the things that were identified. The design has changed over the course of our conversation. So we wanted to be clear that this is where the discussion is, but we haven't made a decision yet. We are sure about the music suite addition and certainly the use for service and emergency access. That enables us to get a fire truck behind the building. That enables us to actually more effectively deliver to the cafeteria and then also pick up garbage. That enables us to put a generator over there, which will be behind some screening. So there's significant utility to the site.
And that way you don't have to use the existing bus loop as a way to bring in delivery trucks and garbage trucks and fire trucks if need be, or ambulances. So it kind of keeps that away from the kids. And also keeps construction vehicles away from the kids during the construction phase.
Very importantly. Otherwise, we have to actually use the backside of the property, which kids currently are using. So it is significantly preferable, yes, to use pieces of the property that, both from a safety and a total utility of the campus.
So, I mean, net, the only aspect of the design so far that the design team still needs guidance on is the nature of the stormwater management. That's the only part of it that's really still up in the air, and we're getting input from a number of different constituencies, Kevin included, who's going to have the fellow who has to operate it and maintain it and keep it working. So
Did we miss anything on 32 White?
I think it was very
Okay.
well done. The 2,500 for the music suite, is that the total size of the music suite, or is that the portion that will sit on 32 Hoyt?
think that's the portion on 32 Hoyt.
Yeah.
But
Is the-
I would need to confirm that. That was my understanding. Sorry.
Yep, no problem. Moving on to the roof. So that's the sum total of what's going to happen on 32 Hoyt. In terms of the roofs, as we noted back in the spring, we remarked that, well, gee, it might make sense to integrate the work that was contemplated on the roofs into this project. At the time, folks didn't want to do that because it was seen as a project that was either already underway or had been appropriated for, and so it was not integrated into our project at the time. There was work undertaken and contemplated and funds raised, and the intent was to renovate the roofs in connection with the installation of solar panels on the roofs. That was mostly planned for the summer of 2021. Thinking about it, it really made sense to us. It made sense to the state, OSC, GNR. Certainly made sense to the design team that we integrate the work on the roofs into the project that we're doing. There's going to be significant new construction, which are obviously going to require roofs. And there's going to also be a lot of work done on the existing roofs, installing HVAC equipment, as well as primarily the brackets for the solar panels, or getting them ready for the solar panels. And it didn't make sense to not do that work, only do the roofs on the new portions of the building, put the HVAC equipment up, and then have to come in later as a separate project that was separately bid, remove that equipment, do the roof works, put that equipment back. Again, the state folks who looked at our design jumped on it right away and said, gee, you guys should think about doing the roofs as part of this project. Fast forward, we were willing to take it on because we thought it was the most efficient and cost-effective thing to do. And Board of Education approved including that in our project at the October 11th Board of Ed meeting. I'm going to fast forward ahead of the next slide, which really I largely just covered. In terms of the funding aspect of it, the Board of Education got an appropriation of $850,000 for Royal. Kevin confirmed that was going to be for those portions of the existing Royal roof other than those portions of Royal that we knew were going to be removed, such as the library, which is getting torn down, and the portables. So it wasn't for the entire Royal roof, it was for a large portion of the Royal roof. Board of Education had not received an appropriation for the Hindley and Holmes roof, but would have been in the 2023-2024 capital plan. Important to note that we're not putting solar panels on as part of this project. That's a separate construction project that the school district is working on with the state of Connecticut Green Bank. We're merely getting the roofs, if you will, ready to receive solar, but we're not installing solar. As I noted at the very, very beginning of the conversation this evening, next slide, Jill, as I noted at the very beginning of the conversation, we have to have our final submission to OSC GNR on December 1st. This really just is repeating the timeline that I spoke about at the very beginning of the conversation and why it's important that we're in front of you this evening. The last item on this slide is worth noting, which is, the state said, look, you can just go ahead with your existing submission. Don't worry about don't include the roofs, don't include 32 Hoyt, because you will get one, in effect, do-over, one reauthorization you could come back to them for during the legislative process. In conversations with the state, we concluded that we'd rather, if we could get it done by the December 1st deadline, the increased appropriation into our submission, that would make sense, and that way we would save our wild card, if you will, for a time in the future, which hopefully we won't need it, but we'd rather have it and not have used it on something now. I'm gonna, as I go through this next part I'm going to let Dave Martin comment because he was really, really involved deeply in the nuts and bolts of, no pun intended, of building the appropriation request. So what we did is we got the schematic design for 32 Hoyt, or the conceptual design for 32 Hoyt, and the ideas around the roof work. The cost estimators who put together the conceptual budget then looked at those, reconciled their two estimates. That was our construction manager, ONGAP, as well as the cost estimator that's retained by our architectural firm. They worked to reconcile those numbers and came up with what they considered the right numbers, the right estimates for the appropriation. Dave spent a lot of time working through those numbers to come up with the actual appropriation amount, slightly rounding those up, and including appropriate escalation and contingency amounts. The building committee voted to approve the appropriation request on the 26th of October, and we have done this presentation with these appropriation requests to, as I noted, the RTM Finance and Budget Committee, the RTM Education Committee, and the Board of Selectmen. And so now we're in front of you. The idea is that the project would be through design development and go out for bid during the winter time. So the next slide is the summation of the appropriation requests. And so, as you noted at the beginning, Jim, we're going to need to do these as what amounts to three, because Holmes can include 32 Hoyt, so three separate authorizations for Hinley, for Holmes, for Royal, and then the Holmes request can include the $750,000 for 32 Hoyt. So what you see there is the net increase in the appropriation requested for each of the schools, and then what that does to the total amount of the appropriation for the three schools and the aggregate project. So if you recall, the aggregate appropriation that you all approved and that the RTM approved and that we submitted to the state in June was 77.5, and now the aggregate appropriation would grow to 82,250. Any questions from that?
Just, thank you for that. The roof projects that are already bonded and largely or partially completed that we've been tracking for the last couple of years, I'm looking at Jen here. So we've got the active bonded projects, we've got Holmes Roof and Skylight, we have Hinley Roof Replacement, and we had Royal. And a lot of money has been spent on the first two and virtually none on the third. So is this basically completing the work, or is it redoing what we've already done?
Kevin
So
is the best one to
If
answer.
you can expand on that.
So the Hinley and Holmes roofs were replaced in the summer of 2021. Those smaller projects are completed and closed out, and we're talking with the state about receiving the reimbursement. The Royal was never given a state project number, so that's why the dollar amount is pretty much untouched.
So that work that was done, is that redundant with what's being done now, or is this
No.
how
Those were
how is the
smaller
work that's
projects.
being
Those are
contemplated?
smaller repair. and
Those were more
replacement types of
repair
projects. This
rather
is
than
more
replacement.
comprehensive.
Those portions won't get touched as part of this.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
I don't know if you can flip up the three diagrams that came around in our
Take me a
pocket.
minute, but I can, yeah.
Okay, because what actually might be helpful, because to understand which are the roofs being sort of accelerated and which are the ones that we had.
And again, Kevin's probably the best person to speak to that because he's actually been up on.
Phil, these ones right here?
Yeah.
Not that we didn't all want to close the roofs too.
And I think, and the other thing we can talk about if you'd like, and again, Dave is the best person to do this, is the reimbursement process from the state, the amount that of this additional appropriation that would be subject to state reimbursement under the formulas that they use.
Sorry, it will take me a minute. If you want to come back to that discussion, it might be easier. It won't take too long, but
Okay, I can toss them up if you want.
do you have them?
If
You
you
want to
have
talk
them
about
on your
reimbursement
computer and you
at
can
all?
toss them up,
I
or
have
if
them.
you'd rather jump to the state reimbursement
Yeah,
discussion
I
first.
can cover that fairly quickly, and Kevin, correct me if I get any of this wrong. The roof looks to the life of the warranty that's on, the OSCGNR looks to the life of the warranty. So if you replace the roof prior to the end of the warranty from the previous job, they subtract some. And what they actually do is they subtract 5% per annum. So if your cost is $1 million, they would subtract 5% for each year. So if you replace it 2 years early, they would subtract $100,000 off, and then they would apply the reimbursement, the gross reimbursement rate to that $900,000 that would be effectively the deemed eligible component. So in our particular case, we believe that the reimbursement rate for the roofs will be the same as that for the rest of the project, which is 20.7% of eligible costs. So where this comes in is, in this case, 2 of the roofs are 16 years old, one of the roofs is 18 years old. So with the phasing for the project isn't yet settled, but you can easily imagine the roofs aren't going to get replaced this summer. Next summer would be my personal
The earliest
guess,
time, yeah.
the earliest time, and my personal guess for when you'd like to try to get it done. So that would be 2 years early for 2 of the roofs, and effectively at the 20-year mark for the other roof. So the way that works out, if I think I looked at and that reimbursement is on the construction cost component. So if you look, the construction cost component for the Royal roof was $1,377,700. So if you replace it at 18 years old, that means of the $1,377,000, only $1,239,000 or $240,000 is deemed an eligible cost. Then you apply the 20% ratio to it, and you end up receiving $256,666 back. To give you an idea, if the Royal roof was to go to 20 years, the difference in reimbursement is about $28,000. So it is a little bit of a hit, but in terms of having the project be able to go forward in the most efficient, effective way, it makes the most sense to do that.
How does that interact with whomever is giving you the warranty, and to the degree that they would reimburse you for the roof having worn out before the end of the warranty period?
Well, I think, I don't know.
But I don't think it's wearing out. We're not suggesting the roofs are wearing out ahead of the warranty, and this is warranty work. This is discretionary replacement of the roofs.
Prior to the end of expiry of the warranty, yeah.
Okay.
So if we're replacing the existing roof, use the example like 3 years early.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't get like a credit back from the person that provided the warranty, do we?
I don't believe so, no.
No, it's.
But we'll
again,
still get
it's
a new
our-
warranty on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So we'll get a new
we'll get the
warranty.
20-year warranty
We'll get a
on
new
the new-
warranty from the contractor for the new roof.
Right.
But it's our decision to take the roof off and replace it
Got it.
before the expiration of the existing warranty. So they're not gonna credit us back.
Got it. And so on this graphic that you have up, the green roofs are the ones that you're
Yeah, like
planning to.
Kevin.
Sure. So what we have here is Henley Elementary School. This, the area in gray where you see the solar panels already slated to go on. This was the roof that was done in summer of 2021. The green roofs are slated to be done as part of this appropriation here.
And are there currently any solar on that school?
No. So what we've done is we've gone back and forth with Green Bank, many iterations of mechanical systems going on the roof. How can they configure their solar arrays? And it just became very inundating, and we've actually decided to pause until the mechanicals and the roofing situation get figured out.
So that green portion of the roof wasn't enhanced in 2021?
Correct.
It was basically however long it was there, it's been.
Well, note also that a lot of this is the new, some of this is the new
Yeah,
construction.
there's
right?
additional square footage.
So it's
as
not,
well.
it wasn't there.
It's not just that.
It literally wasn't there in
Okay, so
2021.
it's tearing that up, the old roof, not the more recently
Correct. The new roof
constructed roof.
will be
Tearing that
untouched.
old roof out and replacing it, and then, of course, you have the additional square footage that needs, obviously. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
That
that's
middle
helpful.
box right there, that looks like it has 2 batteries on the top. That's what we replaced like 18 months ago, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
So that's done, and that's done and paid for.
And was the old roof not able to carry the solar?
So
or
it
was
was,
it just in?
and preliminarily, we were going ahead with a solar design, not fully knowing what the MEP design would be. And then those two entities had to talk to each other to figure out where each system was gonna reside. So now that we're getting further along in the MEP design, Green Bank can come in and say, okay, well, we need to change the size of the solar panel system because they have less roof space to deal with.
And as it relates to Green Bank both finances and oversees the installation
Correct.
and maintenance and operation and sort of billing and everything of,
It's a PPA, it's a power purchase agreement, and they take care of basically the whole entire project.
Got it.
From design to implementation.
So mechanically, we effectively put in conduit or cabling, whatever's necessary for them to run their, to connect their system.
Which is precisely what we did at Oxridge. ONGAP built the building knowing that solar would go on the roof later on, and they built the conduits ready to go to accept solar.
Okay.
and if you look at the work, the pre-work that we need to do to be able to handle the solar power, the solar panels, what does that equate to for a school? Like, I guess not including the sections that we're rebuilding here? Like, what's
Do we
the
price that?
the cost of
I don't think we would
of
price that out.
prepping
We,
the school? Like you
we
were saying,
did-
running the conduits and all of that for the areas where we're not touching.
That individual item, that's too granular for where we're.
But I think
at
that
for
I think much of that is already in the MEP budget, right? So the conduit work, for example, that was already contemplated.
Correct.
Okay.
It was contemplated whether or not, I mean, obviously, we were doing new roofs on the new construction, but I think that a lot of that work was contemplated as part of the original MEP.
It should have been contemplated as part of the original estimates that were done, because that was planned all along. What was not planned was having to replace the surface that the panels would reside on.
Okay.
Okay,
Has
so-
the
okay,
contract been
that's-
negotiated and signed?
For the Green Bank?
Uh-huh.
Has the contract,
So the Board of Selectmen authorized the Board of Education. It's gone back and forward between the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, the respective attorneys at the Green Bank and also the town's attorney. So now it's been cleared that to grant us the permission to actually sign that. So we'll be going back to the Board of Education for permission to sign it.
So, yeah, so when we think about that contract, that's like a 20-year type contract, right? Have you, I guess my understanding was like the Board of Ed, if you will, sort of as an operating entity, could enter into multi-year contracts. I mean, I guess you could, but you can only commit to 1 year's worth of expenditure. So is what we're signing up for basically a 20-year commitment to pay underneath the Green Bank agreement?
The course of the actual payback is over 20 years.
But I mean, I guess underneath, when we have these installed, are we committing, like we as a town, if you will, committing to a 20-year payment scheme of which, hopefully when the sun shines, there's a net back and we get savings?
Well, as a PPA, you don't actually commit any funds up front. It's all paid for through the Green Bank. So yes, you are committing to having the panels there for 20 years producing the energy, but there is no out-of-pocket expenditure.
We're effectively committing to purchase the electricity from them for the 20-year period. And the payments that we make under that stream of cash flows will effectively compensate them for owning and installing all the equipment.
Yeah, and I guess that was part of my question. I just, because we are entering into a sort of a long-term agreement, like let's say we didn't purchase power, right? it would be changed. I thought sort of multi-year contracts needed to be approved by the town and be authorized. And one of the things, I guess, we'd ask Jen maybe just to make sure we don't need sort of RTM approval to enter into a 20-year contract. I think that's the same reason like the Board of Ed generally can't enter into 5-year leases on vehicles, I think, right? Unless there's some type of appropriation. Now, I know sometimes we do take advantage of buying subscriptions where we can pay year one for like 3 years, but just in terms of making sure we're not committing to.
How does the employment contract work if it's a 3-year union contract? The Board of Ed is, right, entering into a 3-year contract,
Yeah.
even though the monies haven't been appropriated, and the monies are appropriate to fund that on an annual basis.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this be similar, just a longer term?
Well, I think it's a little bit different. Like if you think about a lease, like a 5-year auto lease, you're paying it no matter what. I think an employment agreement, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, that's really, we're agreeing what we're going to pay each teacher each year based on their, it's not an employment guarantee, right?
I think for the purposes of tonight, I think probably solar is at the margin. If in future, I think it's worth us confirming that that's the case, us being Board of Ed side of this discussion. But as far as the building committee is concerned, whether or not, even if solar were off the table, we do, as you can see, Kevin, maybe you can point out some of the HVAC, we definitely need to redo these roofs because we need to get the HVAC up there. And we don't want to move the HVAC in 2 or 4 years' time to redo the roofs.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly will keep on the solar conversation and be a part of the Board of Ed will be a part of the due diligence on that, and we certainly welcome, that discussion. But the committee believes that the appropriation for the roofs is critical just for the base work that we're already
Yeah,
able to.
I understand that's not core here, but I think as we're kind of doing stuff and spending a little bit of money here to prep for that,
Yeah.
we should let's just think about that contract. And the other thing, I guess, maybe just to think about, and the Green Bank is effectively, it's a financing source to allow corporations, municipalities, and so forth that can't sort of pay for it all up front, to be able to amortize it over 20 years, effectively built into a power agreement. So just one of the things that, as you're looking into that contract, and again, I know this is, you're kind of, HHR is sort of prepping for the solar, not deciding on the solar, but let's just make sure we really think about the overall economics of that, just because like from a high level, if you looked at the balance sheet, you'd say, well, the Green Bank raises money that it lends to its customers at a A+ rating, which is taxable when they raise money, versus like when Darien being AAA, when we borrow money to fund the exact same purchase, we borrow it at a tax-exempt AAA rate. So like the funding differences are a couple hundred basis points. So
Yeah, but the difference is then the town buys the equipment, owns the equipment, maintains the equipment. It's not buying power, it's the rate at which the Green Bank, I don't know enough about the details about the Green Bank, but the whole idea of it is that it's a much more attractive rate and should be cheaper than the town buying the equipment, installing the equipment, maintaining the equipment, replacing it as it becomes obsolete over the course of the power purchase agreement. Right?
well, yeah,
But again,
I don't know what the
Jill-
contract looks like.
Yeah, but to Jill's point, our jurisdiction ends
Yep.
at like putting in the conduits, putting the roof on. And while this is a good discussion, it's and
Yeah,
obviously
we'll
has to be
follow up
had,
afterwards on this.
we our committee, it's not part of our mandate. We don't have any authority to deal with it, frankly, so.
Thanks, Tim. So just to be clear, all the appropriations in here don't have any solar costs, but it does include costs for the apparatus, if you want to call it that, the prepping, if you want to call it that, of putting solar panels on these 3 schools,
Yes.
right? And then I know we're taking the Green Bank and putting it off to the
The
side.
appropriation generally, not necessarily the increased appropriation that we're asking for this evening, but the gross appropriation contemplates that stubbing out, it's as if the best analogy is the plumbing behind the walls and then you put the sink on, and we're not putting the sink on.
Mhm.
So,
Got it.
And I think, David, you said we don't have the granular detail to figure out how much it is just to install that apparatus on these 3 buildings, right?
Well, the only incremental part for us would be installing the conduit as part of the construction process so that any cabling attached to the solar systems would make it to the ground to their conversion equipment.
Basically, it's the penetrations, right? So it can go through the
Yeah.
roof down to
So,
the mechanical rooms in the school.
We don't have, estimated down to that level to know exactly. We can guess that having the conduits installed is not uber expensive. It's not the most expensive part of the
So
project.
it sounds like some of the prep work is buried in here, but it's de minimis relative to the overall project.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Royal.
Right, so conversely, Royal, you see no gray shaded areas, it's all green, because the roofs that were slated to be done weren't done in summer of 2021. So therefore, we need to replace all those roofs, less the parts that are being fully renovated or added onto.
And then homes.
So homes, we did a much bigger roof replacement last summer. Flat roofs here, pitch roofs in the front, new shingles. So now we're calling for it over this classroom wing and the cafeteria in particular, which is why it's a much smaller ask than the others.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions for us before you all deliberate?
No.
Thank you. Again, thank you very much for your time and for doing this on an expedited basis.
Thanks, guys.
Well, for yours.
Yeah, you guys are doing a lot more work than we are.
That would be those two right there.
Me.
Okay. So Jen, if I'm correct, we'll go through all three of these separately.
Right.
Okay. So the first one we will deal with is the Hindley School. And so may I have a motion to vote on the resolution to increase an appropriation for the planning, design, and renovation of the Hindley Elementary School from $26 million to $27,550,000, and to authorize the issuance of bonds and notes to finance the appropriation in the amount of $27,550,000.
Move.
Rob moves. Dave seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. And I'm not reading the entire resolution here, because the only thing that's really changed effectively are the
Can I ask a clarification? So the way this, I'm looking at our packet, and the packet has a column, Jen, that you prepared that says, proposed HHR amendment, 4.75 million. And as if it's a single bond, but it's not. It's simply for illustrative purposes to show what the debt service cost would be.
Correct.
It will be built into the bonds that we do collectively.
Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. All right.
It's actually three different debt schedules, isn't it, Jen? Sort of behind it, which we've aggregated.
Yeah.
Right.
And each
Yeah.
one like is issued a year after each other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good question. Okay, so the next one will be homes. So can I have a motion to pass a resolution to increase an appropriation for the planning, design, and renovation of the Holmes Elementary School from $24 million to $25,600,000, and to authorize the issuance of bonds and notes to finance the appropriation in the amount of $25,600,000. Dan moves. John seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Last but not least, Royal. Could someone move the resolution to increase an appropriation for the planning, design, and renovation of the Royal Elementary School from $27,500,000 to $29,100,000, and to authorize the issuance of bonds and notes to finance the appropriation in the amount of $29,100,000? Rob moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Jen, in terms of housekeeping, as part of this, at a later date, will we cancel the $850,000?
Yes, at your December meeting, once this is passed, RTM will bring forward the request to rescind the Royal Roof authorization.
And have we expended any sort of smaller? I don't
About
have that.
$16,000.
Yeah.
And so can we just move that over to this? or do we have-
No, because it was done before these were in place in separate purpose originally. But what we can do is we have unused bond proceeds on both the Henley and Holmes roofs that we're gonna reallocate, and so we'll use that to clean up Royal and probably move the remainder of the unused bond proceeds to HHR.
Has the work that was previously authorized and previously bonded been completed? So the unspent proceeds in each of those projects is largely available?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we didn't move that back
And
into
there's,
our reserve?
there's
No,
considerable
you
amounts.
can't move it into your reserve.
There's over $200,000 in the Holmes, and there's approximately $150,000 in the Henley project.
Right, and one thing that we're kind of waiting on is to see what the final state reimbursement is, so we know exactly
Yeah,
what we can move out of there.
okay.
But those are the rough numbers.
So
that
so
we'll
all
be
else
able to
being equal, when we
reallocate.
went to market, in theory, we would just raise 250 less?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, that completes our agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn? John moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous.